When I describe the UK's Prime Minister Two Tier Keir Starmer as an authoritarian, or Elon Musk says the Labour leader has created a police state, some of the usual suspect lefties start to scoff. But the jailing of housewife Lucy Connelly, who not so coincidentally happens to be the wife of a Conservative Party councillor, for 2.5 years yesterday for a tweet, proves that dissidents are now being locked up. But now the eminent but cancelled historian David Starkey has spoken up in a bombshell interview with the Daily Skeptic to reveal slippery Starmer tried to jail him too for speech.
I've never met Keir Starmer, I'm delighted to say, but we have, as they say, previous. At the time of my cancellation back in 2020, Starmer was the only person in public life who wanted poor little Darren Grimes and me to be charged under the Section 6 of the Public Order Act, which I think carries mandatory imprisonment and up to 6 years. But is the measure of the man, the measure of his nastiness, the measure of his desire for vengeance, the measure of his hatred of free speech and his general hatred of freedom.
A hatred of free speech, a general hatred of freedom. Yes, David Starkey, you're completely right. But David wasn't done there. He also slammed Starmer for politicising the so-called riots after the Southport Massacre for his own gain.
Let's look at the two. What he tried to do, of course, with the riots was to claim that they were the product of this mythical far right. Remember, far right means absolutely nothing at all. It means just what you and I would call on the right spectrum of politics. So what he did, and I think it was a profoundly dangerous thing, he immediately politicized the riots. And it's very striking if you look back and compare the public reaction to the policing of the riots in 2011 and in 2024.
And in a view that you will never hear on the MSM, but I have spoken about, given I'm now in the independent media, since those very dark days after the Southport Massacre, David insists that what these so-called rioters were fighting for was right.
The whole thing is a disastrous, utter mess. And do you know who summarised it best? The consequence. It was those rioters in the north of England. Their principal cry was, "We want our country back." They felt viscerally that it had been taken away. They felt viscerally that they had no voice. They felt viscerally that they'd been cheated. And do you know what? They were right.
Oh, can't you just see the usual suspects? The liberal authoritarians, as Matt Goodwin has described them today, like Emily Maitlis and John Sopel and Carol Vorderman and Gary Lineker, having their heads exploded over that one. But I think Starkey is right, because poor Lucy Connelly is just one of 400 political prisoners already locked up, while paedophiles like Hugh Edwards don't get a day in jail. And there is growing outrage over her sentence that leaves a 12-year-old girl without her mother. Her mother, by the way, this is Lucy, who was so traumatized by the death of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift dance class because her son Harry died in 2012, aged just 19 months, from dehydration after a series of basic errors by the NHS. But the judge didn't give a damn about that while sentencing Lucy yesterday. And by the way, I am in touch with Lucy's husband, Raymond Connelly, the Tory councillor, and he was stunned by the harshness of his wife's sentence and is currently deciding whether to appeal. And while the MSM completely ignores this story, luckily the only space for free discussion, Elon Musk's X, is pointing out the egregious nature of it. For example, from Emily Davison. On the same day Lucy Connelly was jailed for 31 months for a Facebook post, well, it was a tweet, but same thing, a policeman who sexually assaulted 2 women, a registered sex offender who asked children for naked pics online, and a pervert voyeur who secretly filmed women on the toilet because he was, quote, horny, all walked free. And what about the Birmingham judge who decided to lock up Lucy for such a long time? Well, it was actually Kelvin Mackenzie who drew my attention to a key thread. He wrote, this is a required read about the idiot judge who thought it appropriate to give a 2.5-year sentence for a woman who sent a tweet. There was no proof offered that it incited anybody. She should get a decent KC and appeal. And this information has come from the stark naked brief on X, who wrote, some context on the judge that sentenced Lucy Connelly, the wife of a Conservative councillor, to 31 months in prison. In April, Judge Melbourne Inman KC, the recorder of Birmingham, presided over the case of Muhammad Abdkar. Abdkar set 2 worshippers on fire as they left mosques in 2023 and was subsequently found guilty of attempted murder. But because Abdkar suffered from mental health issues, Judge Inman decided a prison sentence was not appropriate. So he instead sentenced Abdkar to an indefinite hospital order. Judge Inman further explained this was because of the possibility of him relapsing and causing significant risk to others. For Connelly, Judge Inman said the sentence for her offences was intended to punish and deter. So the naked brief says that due to our sentencing guidelines, the way our laws are written, the choice of charges and the judge's discretion, we've once again ended up with violent words being more harshly punished than actual violent action. And Peter Lloyd also pointed to another case, writing, the judge who sentenced Lucy Connelly previously gave a Muslim man, and it was actually according to community notes on X, by the way, the man was Sikh, but that's irrelevant, the point remains, just 18 months for killing a little girl. Antonio Boparan pleaded guilty to causing death by dangerous driving and served just 9 months. The judge was Melbourne Inman UC. So you get less time for killing a little girl than posting an inappropriate message on X. And while it was a different judge, I still cannot get over the story of Mohammed Hassan. He avoided jail altogether. Now, this Muslim man was caught on CCTV physically attacking 3 Asian women because they were in Western dress. During a 51-second brutal attack, Hassan grabbed the driver, slammed her head onto the dashboard of her vehicle at the petrol station. He then grabbed another woman's hair and punched her in the head before hitting the 3rd woman. Now, you're not going to believe what sentence he got. 6 months suspended. So that guy who beat up 3 women on CCTV for 51 seconds will not spend a single minute in jail. I'm sorry, how is that justice? Given the sentence Lucy Connelly was handed down for a bloody tweet. Two Tier UK is revolting. But now, it's time for the Superstar panel. And I am absolutely delighted today to be joined by 2 of my favourites. Mayurun Senthalnathan, who is, of course, a Reform UK man, and my friend Christine Hamilton. And I've got to tell you about this, the host of a brand new interview series on 1VSP. And guess who's one of her first guests? Yes, it's me. It's me. And Christine, you were a brilliant interviewer, I have to say. You got a lot out of me. So it is worth heading to Christine Hamilton's X account, Brit Battleaxe, to go and watch that interview after this show, of course. But Mayurun, let me start with you. What do you make of David Starkey making a comment that you're certainly not going to hear anywhere in the mainstream media? He wasn't saying that the riots were right, that it was right to be violent, that it was right to break the law, but saying the rioters were right in terms of the point they were making.
Yeah, so David Starkey, I would consider him to be one of the wisest men in this country.
Big time.
To be honest. And the thing is, the people who were protesting, let's say, and the rioting was obviously wrong, but the people who are protesting, they identify with this country. They identify their whole being, their whole nature. their whole purpose. They identify this country, hence why they want this country back. Keir Starmer, on the other hand, he identifies not with this country, but with his own self-righteousness. And it's a massive form of arrogance and ego. And so when he sees that his ego is challenged, which this is an affront to his ego, he launches out in an authoritarian way. And I think that's what we see with David Starkey. That's what we see with the protests and the riots and the constant slamming and slurs of far right. He wants it to go away, and he wants it to go away aggressively because he wants to maintain himself in the bubble of his arrogance and his self-righteousness. And that's where the authoritarian instinct comes from. And so I think David Starkey is right to call it out. I think, condemn the violence, but the impetus to claim back the country, Keir Starmer simply does not understand that. He doesn't get it. They live in a different universe to him, quite frankly.
Christine Hamilton, how do you feel about David Starkey's comment?
Well, I mean, I think those comments, your comments and Mayurun's comments were absolutely right. He lives in a parallel universe. He doesn't inhabit the same world that I inhabit. He clearly doesn't. He is now, because he's the Prime Minister, he's in this wonderful elite little bubble, and he's basically untouchable for goodness knows how many more months, nearly 5 years. And I don't know, he must have different spectacles to me. We know where they come from. I just don't.
And we know they're very, very expensive.
And we know they're too expensive for him to afford, even on his enormous salary. But I just don't see the world in the same way that he does. And the way you have described these differential sentences that have been handed down recently is, I mean, any normal person, average normal person, it is sheer. I can't really think of the right word. It is just so wrong and so obviously wrong to put somebody in prison. We are overcrowded in prison. Didn't Keir Starmer just let a whole load of people out, some of whom immediately reoffended? How have we possibly got room for an innocent, okay, it was a misguided tweet, but basically she is an innocent housewife who made a mistake, and she quickly corrected it. She hasn't killed anybody, she hasn't hurt anybody, she obviously knows she did wrong. To put her in prison, I mean, what is that costing? Never mind the cost to her and her family and her husband and etc. What is that costing the taxpayer? And is that really value for money? No. And to say she's been put there to encourager les autres is basically what the judge said. It's a blatant political sentence.
Yes, well, I believe she's a political prisoner. I believe she's a political prisoner.
It's not justice. It's absolutely not justice. And it's certainly not British justice.
Couldn't agree more. Now, Mayurun, the first time you were on the show, you'd gone viral for your post talking about why things that these liberal authoritarians say are far right aren't actually far right. But what's interesting is that Sly News has been utterly determined to prove that there's some big far-right movement in the UK that sparked the so-called riots in Southport. But this week, they had to admit defeat, because what they actually discovered is that all of the social media activity from the so-called far-right was actually coming from overseas. So I'll get your reaction, but just have a look at what they had to admit on air.
More brilliant work by you and the team this time, looking online about who was responsible for stirring up hatred with the riots in the summer.
Yeah, exactly. We want to take a deep dive and look at especially Telegram, the messaging app where a lot of these riots were sort of talked about and organised. I think what we were really surprised by is how many of these were not from the UK. So we looked at more than sort of 10,000 groups, went through all these messages, and it turns out the majority of these were not coming from the UK. They were abroad, effectively what you might call foreign interference.
But Mayurun, I wasn't surprised at all. I know Sly News was surprised because they don't get out of their homes. But actually, there is no real far right in this country, is there? The people who were protesting, and I appreciate that nothing should ever turn violent, and I'm very consistent on that, but they were angry, ordinary people. They were not part of this bogeyman far right.
Yeah, I mean, the Labour government, they hide behind words like far right. They hide behind words like working class people. What does that mean? Even things like austerity, all of these things. What is a woman? They can't define what a woman is. So how can you trust these people who can't define what a woman is? When they use language, they use it as a fig leaf to cover their incompetence or their ideology, which is often quite unpopular. But the Sky News report feeds into an overall truth that the real threat of terrorism is what MI5 has openly said is 3/4 of their caseload is Islamist terrorism. Far-right terrorism is in comparison a fraction of that. I mean, the amount of people that are genuinely sort of swastika-bearing, Nazi-saluting individuals is absolutely tiny. And I, as an ethnic minority, someone of a brown skin, whatever it is, the last time I received any kind of racist abuse or discrimination, I simply cannot remember.
Wow.
I simply cannot remember the last time I had anything like this in this country. This country is not racist, but the narrative is they have to put it as far right to justify their authoritarian implementation of sentencing, of clamping down on rights and so on. And so they need that narrative to continue.
And Christine, the thing is, Keir Starmer, Slippery Starmer, Two Tier Keir, he's totally out of step where even the rest of Europe is going. I mean, at the moment, you've got the EU effectively looking at the concept of mass deportations, looking at the concept of schemes like Rwanda, because the public are not going to put up with it anymore. So he can try for some time to try and brand all of this far right, or he calls it populist and snake oil populism. That's his little term that he's using at the moment. That's only going to hold for so long, isn't it? First though, hot flashes, sleepless nights, weight gain, joint pain. I know a lot of you are dealing with or have dealt with these symptoms, especially the women in the Outspoken family. So of course I haven't experienced menopause. Of course I haven't. But I've heard from so many of you about the challenges that do come with it. So I'm coming to you with a bit of good news today because Verso, a product that I've been taking for months, and it's been transformative to me, but actually is also transformative for a lot of women who are dealing with menopause or perimenopause. I know it's a tough phase, but Celbene by Verso is designed to target those symptoms head on by addressing the root cause. It's formulated with ingredients that are proven to increase NAD plus levels in the body. That is huge because NAD plus is what keeps your cells healthy and energized, but it drops off as we age and especially during menopause. And here's the thing, boosting NAD plus can make a big difference in how you feel. Women who've taken Celbene are reporting some pretty amazing changes. Hot flashes disappearing, more energy, joint pain relief, weight loss, and mental clarity. And I've even heard from some listeners who've told me their periods have come back or have become regulated and they feel like they've turned back the clock on aging. The ingredients in Celbene have shown to balance hormones without going the traditional hormone therapy route. It also helps with inflammation and metabolism, which is especially helpful for managing weight and keeping you feeling your best. Plus, these research-backed ingredients have been shown to improve bone health, which is crucial for postmenopausal women at risk of osteoporosis. What I love about Celbene, and I think you do too, is it doesn't just mask the symptoms, it tackles the root causes of aging, helping you feel stronger, healthier, and more energized from the inside out. And if you haven't tried it yet and you're ready to take control of your health and feel more like yourself, click the link in the description in YouTube and Rumble or head on over to buy.ver.so. Use the coupon code Outspoken at checkout to save 15% on your first order. So if you're tired of the sleepless nights, the hot flashes, or just feeling off, give Celbene a try. It's already helped so many of you, and I'm confident it can help even more too. So I'll repeat the address one more time. www.buy.ver.so/outspoken when you check out to get that incredible 15% discount. Just make sure you use the coupon code Outspoken. But now back to the show.
Well, what's wrong with populism, frankly? I know the way he's using it, there's a lot wrong with it, but I mean, it's absurd. And I'm very pleased to hear Mayurun say that he has almost never received racial abuse. And this country is not full of far-right swastika-bearing thugs. It's not. But anybody who is slightly to the right of Keir Starmer, which is not difficult, is regarded as off the spectrum. It's just their way of trying to close down people who have a different view in that direction. And most people in this country just want to get on with their lives. They're not interested in far right, far left. But what they do want is they want their country back, and they want their country back,
which is
and
the
they
point.
expect the government to deal with it. And it doesn't look to me as though this Starmer government is going to take the tough measures. And of course, they're tough measures. Rwanda would have been a tough measure, but that's what we need. The situation is rapidly getting seriously out of control. It's spiraling out of control. I mean, how many have come over in the boats? I mean, whether it's legal immigration or illegal immigration, it's too much, and enough is enough. And somebody has got to get a grip and stop it. And unfortunately, the Tories didn't grasp the nettle. They had this famous 14 years to do it, and they frankly did nothing. The Labour government's not going to do anything. So is it any wonder that normal average people feel that they are powerless and helpless? And if they want to take to the streets, frankly, good for them. And they do expect, if they do, they expect fair policing.
Yeah, but they're not getting that.
An actual crime, then they would expect to be dealt with properly. But they do not expect this, as you say. It isn't 2-tier, it's 4, 5, 6, 7-tier policing. There's no, you can't trust your own legal system. And clearly the case of the judge in this Lucy Connelly business, I mean, honestly, that was just his prejudice coming out, frankly. That's not justice.
Mayurun, you wanted to come
Just
in?
a quick point, Dan. What Keir Starmer likes to pretend is that it's people like Nigel Farage who is radicalising the public, but they fail to admit that it's government policy, if anything, that is actually radicalising the British people. The constant like Christine was saying, mass migration, illegal migration, massive cultural change over just a couple of decades, that's what people are yearning for. Can I have my country back? Right? Yeah. Can I actually have a society, a community that I believe in once again? That's what they're yearning for.
Well, Mayurun,
and they're being radicalised by government, not by individuals.
It's interesting, though, because we talk about the political situation and you talk about Farage, but there's this big battle going on within the Conservative Party too. And I wanted to get your reaction to Steve Baker, the former cabinet minister, on GB News yesterday, actually describing Reform UK as dangerous. So watch this, and then I'll get your reaction off the bat.
It's quite dangerous for the country, actually, because I think reform is a strategic mistake. Look, the reality is they've got 5 MPs, so about the same size, I think, now as the DUP. So in terms of numbers in the House of Commons, I'm sorry, they're irrelevant. Labour will get its business, and which way reform votes is never going to matter in this Parliament.
But we have democracy, and that's why we
that's
like
lovely.
having minor parties.
And that's lovely. Yeah, and that's lovely and super, and they'll be important. What Nigel says will dominate the headlines and will be important. But when it comes to actually what is the business in the House of Commons and which way does the vote go, they'll be immaterial. Now, if what people want is good quality centre-right government, I'm afraid what they need to do is save the Conservative Party. And I know your viewers won't like me saying that, but I think this is a massive strategic mistake.
Well, no, I don't like it, Steve, because you didn't deliver good quality centre-right government. You delivered bad quality centre-left government. But what do you make of him describing Reform UK as dangerous, though? Because I would argue, Mayurun, that's actually dangerous rhetoric in itself. What is dangerous about your party?
Well, this goes back to what I said before. Government policy has radicalised the British people, and the way out of that radicalisation is to give them a voice, is to give them a legitimate voice, especially in Parliament. And that's what Reform UK is actually doing. But Steve Baker is doing the typical Conservative, pompous, arrogant lens that he sees things through. He doesn't understand the political momentum and trajectory and the whole landscape that is now unfolding. That's different to what it was before the general election. He doesn't understand that a Conservative Party is actually 2 souls trapped in one body. You've got a Liberal Democrat soul and you've got a Reform UK soul trapped in the Conservative Party. One part, and that's why when Kemi Badenoch in a recent debate, she said Robert Jenrick wants to leave the ECHR, but that's going to split the party and we have to be very careful about that. She understands these are massive issues. And the Conservative Party, they talk tough, but the problem is because they're split under the stress of actually doing the major changes that this country so desperately needs, they will crack and they will actually, their leader will be toppled and they'll get another leader because they're broken as a brand and they're split. However, reform by its very DNA is constructed to bring up British identity, to control borders, to scrap net zero targets, low regulation, low tax. All of these things are what reform was made for. So it's a party designed for the times that we live in and the change that we need. And we have a leader that has proven himself over decades, whereas they have Generic, who was in government and then did a U-turn, a massive turn, and then you've got Kemi Badenoch, who's also in government. I don't think he understands the objective of how we're second place in 100 seats, and we have momentum to do council elections and by-elections going forward.
Oh, yeah. No. You're a growing force, absolutely. But I just wanted to quickly say on Kemi Badenoch, I think it's even more significant than that. I mean, this is a woman who argued for mass immigration. This is a woman that once she was in government, didn't want to go ahead with the bonfire of the removal of EU legislation. She did quite the opposite. She's a stooge of Michael Gove. She's a stooge of the CCHQ. And I'm very surprised, actually, that Conservative members, I'm worried, seem to be being suckered into it. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.